Welcome to Personalist Manifestos. My name is Michael, if this is your first time joining us for a conversation. And it seems like we're having a lot of first Personalist Manifestos things these days. In this Personalist Manifestos first, I have a conversation with my colleague, Dr. Joel Karitko, about the Bible, Genesis, civilization, and the city. You'll hear more about the origin story for this conversation in what's to come, but let me give you a little bit of a preview here. The other day, Joel was talking about Genesis, Cain, and the city, and I said, well, that's interesting. Have you read Jacques Ellul's commentary called The Meaning of the City? And Joel said, no, I haven't. And I said, you should read it. So he read some portions of it, and we decided, coming out of that, that we should have a conversation. So here we are. And as you'll see, we talked a lot. It is a sprawling conversation. So we broke it up into three parts. The first two I'm posting this week. The final part I'll post next week so we don't overload you with content. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I know I enjoyed having it. And with that, here's my conversation with Joel. Joel Karitko. Welcome to
Michael
Personalist
Morelli.
Manifestos. It's great to have you here. For those who are new to Personalist Manifestos, or for those who are new to Joel's YouTube channel, it's just your name, right?
Joel Koretko. Yep.
Yeah, just going for it. I went with the more sort of like branded, mysterious title. Uh,
You are branded and mysterious, though. That's the thing.
I'm branded and mysterious. Well, we are talking about Cain and the mark of Cain today, so you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
are we all branded in a way? We'll get to that later. Um, but first things first, Joel and I are colleagues, and so this is a fun opportunity, I think, for both of us to do what we do around the office, in the classroom, in meetings, but do it with recording, camera recording. So, um, how about you start, Joel, just by sharing a little bit about who you are, where you're at school wise, and I can do the same so people can get to know both of us.
Yeah, sure. So, hello to Michael's audience and everyone out there. I'm Dr. Joel Koretko. I'm the assistant professor of biblical studies, or an assistant professor of biblical studies at Northwest Seminary and College. And I'm also in charge of some of our CBTE programming, and that's just like our competency-based theological education. And so I do things in that regard with quality control, kind of overseeing a lot of different aspects of that, many, many hats that I wear. And as Michael knows, in this field, you're often throwing hats on and off quicker than you can even kind of perceive. There's a lot you do, especially on faculty and that kind of thing, committees and whatnot. Yeah, so that's my role at Northwest. I am also a biblical scholar, and I work particularly in, well, I'm all over the place, to be honest. I don't like being pigeonholed. I really hate it. I'm just very interested in the Bible and how this set of documents works together and interfaces with these documents interface with each other, and the theologies we find in the Bible, the different facets, ways of looking at God and coming together with this kind of these visions of God, and I love it. I love the Bible. I tell everybody, and I usually start most meetings off with people who don't know me and are trying to get to know me, that I'm just a Bible geek. That's who I am. I'm just a Bible geek in the end. I'm fascinated by the Bible. I'm also a Christian, and I'm also committed in that way to a biblical faith. And so, yeah, it's a fascination of mine. My publications focus at this point. It's been a lot of Septuagint. So I wrote a book here, Death of the Covenant Code, Capital Punishment, Old Greek Exodus in light of Greco-Egyptian law, which is essentially just looking at laws in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and seeing how they differ from the Hebrew text, and I think in ways that conform with the law at the time, the Greek law at the time, which is a whole other subject that we could talk about one time, Michael. We often
Yes.
rant about this
Oh
together.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
100%.
about how law functions and that kind of thing, and ways that people integrate law into their world. I also focus a lot on the Pentateuch these days. I'm writing a lot on the Pentateuch. A lot of my ideas revolve around the Pentateuch, revolve around a lot of it. I've been thinking a lot about violence, a lot about some of the issues in the Pentateuch, a lot about law especially because of what I did with my dissertation. Other publications are also Septuagint, but I got some Hebrew Bible stuff also in the works currently. And yeah, that's me. But I also teach New Testament, so yeah,
He
I'm
can
all over
do
the
it
place.
all. He can do it all, folks. What do you do for fun? I mean, not that you have a lot of time, but I know that you have a life outside of teaching and scholarship. So what's fun for Joel?
What's fun for me? Yeah. I do a lot of, like I said, this is not only my job, but my hobby. So I'm always reading and thinking about Bible. I'm geeking out on various things, various strands of Christian thought and thought about religion. So as much as it's also my job, it's my hobby. So I'm always listening and reading. I follow some stuff online on YouTube, some of the debates and like apologetics and debates in critical scholarship online, that kind of thing, and have my eye there. So that's again, you're asking me not, but the reality is this is very much of what I think about all the time. It's just how my mind works. But outside of that, I have a family and I hang out with my family as much as I can. And so that takes up a lot of my time. I got small children, three kids under 10. So that takes up tons of time. That's most of my time, and I want that to be most of my time. Going to kids' baseball games, dancing, gymnastics, whatever. I want to be there for my kids and my wife. So that takes up pretty much all my time, and there we go. But on the 20 minutes that I do have, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I like lifting weights. I've been a weightlifter since I was like
Oh, he
14.
lifts.
I
He
do you even
lifts.
lift?
Oh my
I
goodness.
do. I do
I
lift.
don't
Yeah.
lift. I do cardio.
That's okay.
I'm
I
not
don't do
interested in
cardio.
having I'm not interested in like, you know, I just I don't need to be like a bodybuilder. I just want to go to my doctor and not have him say your cholesterol is terrible or you have circulation issues or, you have
Yeah,
heart disease. That's my goal. I'm
that's
just
fair.
it's
Yeah.
modest. I don't need to be ripped. I just need to not die.
Yeah, no, I'm the opposite. I'm just completely vain and I just want to be that good looking, you know? So incredibly, ridiculously good looking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're in biblical studies, right? It's a very vain discipline.
Yes, yeah, yeah. We're all complete narcissists, anyways. You can't get in this field if you're not a narcissist. Yeah. No, I've been lifting since I was, yeah, for a long time. I really enjoy it. I never did sports. I just always just lifted weights as my way of getting exercise. If you do cardio, that means that when the apocalypse comes, you will survive because I couldn't run down my street without being out of breath. So
Yeah, you don't have to run faster than the zombie. You just need to run faster than the person that you're
then
with.
me,
That's
then
my
me.
strategy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I would lose real quick. So yeah, I lift weights a bit. What else do I do? I have a Scotch collection, so
Yes.
I hunt
Yes, you do.
Scotch. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Scotch, scotch, scotch.
Yeah.
Here
And
it
so I kind
goes.
of am online hunting scotches. I'm like a nerd in that way.
Yeah.
Like I actually like search for and enter lotteries to have chances to buy bottles, like all that kind of thing. I'm a total geek there too. Oh man, I like being outside. That's about
Yeah.
it. Those are the
Yep.
things I think about.
And you hunt too.
Oh, I'm a
Yep.
hunter. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do hunt. I mean, sorry, there is more, I guess. I'm just trying to be short here because we're
Yeah.
talking about me
It's
forever.
good.
But yeah, I also do tabletop board gaming with my wife.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. This will be my last question, then
Yeah.
we can move forward. But I always say that you can tell a lot about a person based on what class they choose in D&D
Oh yeah.
or RPG. And for the uninitiated, that's nerd speak for fantasy role-playing games and all that sort of stuff. So, what's your go-to class?
Here's the thing, I actually don't have one. I try and change it
Oh, you're a
every
bit of a
time.
shapeshifter. Okay.
Yeah,
That
yeah. I
makes
try and
sense.
change things up because I like novelty. I like to try
Right.
something new. I like the challenge of something new.
Okay.
So I can't think of one that I've repeated because there's a lot of classes.
Yeah.
So I'm basically just running a circle over like 5 to 10 years.
Okay. That does tell us a lot about you. I mean, and it totally squares with what you've been saying so far about yourself. You're a Swiss Army knife, maybe even a Renaissance man, and I respect that. Um, Ask me what class that I always choose.
What class do you always choose, Michael?
Wood elf, ranger. That's my
Oh
go-to.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And then, as you upgrade, if you can get a cool pet, then
Hmm. Oh
I'm
yeah.
living the dream.
This
If I can't
guy.
do if I can't do that, then maybe a rogue, bit of a
Yep.
swashbuckler. Um, yeah.
Nice. Just
I
jabbing
I
that
like
knife in someone's
stealth.
back, hey?
Yes, stealth.
Yeah.
Why
That makes a
why
lot of
go
sense with
in?
how you work at the office too, you know?
Listen up, kids. If you want to be an academic, you
There's no
get
other
good at
choice.
your knifing
The knife's
skills.
in their back or it's in yours.
Exactly. No, no, don't do that. Actually, I think I very much try not to be that type of person, and I believe that it's possible to be uh, I don't know, to do this work and not be cutthroat. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe it doesn't advance you as fast as others who play the game do, but you know, uh, you can still make a go of it and not get into that sort of stuff. But it's more of like a strategy thing of like, why go in guns blazing like some warrior and just, when you can finish off a lot of people with a bow
I was about to say, this is kind of like a
before,
rogue,
yeah,
Michael.
yeah, yeah. But like when you need to, you get out the swords. But up until then, just sneak around.
That's fair.
Uh,
Hey, while you're talking about that, why don't you, because probably a lot of people who are coming in to watch this are from my kind of
yeah,
YouTube sphere,
sure.
where I have apparently I now do YouTube. News to you and
Yeah,
I, it's like, oh, okay,
yeah,
Joel's on YouTube now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
But for
Um,
those people, why don't you tell them what do you do? What are you interested in? What is this podcast you're doing?
Yeah. So I also work at Northwest College and Seminary, and I used to oversee the competency-based theological education programs that Joel is now overseeing. So there's a connection there. And some of you may be asking, well, what is competency-based theological education or CBTE? And basically, what I tell people is it's a different word for discipleship, or it's a different word for apprenticeship style learning. So we're a school that trains current and future pastors, chaplains, sometimes marriage and family therapy or counselors. But when we're training people for ministry leadership, we keep them in the ministry context. We pull them out of that context every once in a while for instruction in the classroom. But we also surround them with a team of mentors, one of whom's a professor or academic type, but also ministry mentors and such, so that they get the real hands-on experience, so that they're going into the field with experience, not just sort of dropping them in and seeing what happens. But I'm also associate professor of theology and ethics, and now I manage our lifelong learning. And this is kind of a part of the lifelong learning stuff that we do here. Is for quite some time we have focused just on delivering programs, ministry training, and scholarly programs. But now we're in a phase where we're asking, how do we engage with the wider world? Like, there's people out there who maybe don't need to do another degree, but they still want to stay connected with the school. They still want to learn. They still want to be a part of a learning community and grow. And so the work I do in lifelong learning is there to meet that need. Um, in terms of theology and ethics, what I tell people is that I love the Bible, so I am also a Bible geek. I also am a theology geek. I like doctrine, and I think that doctrine should emerge from Scripture. Um, and I also think that spending time within this thing that we call theological tradition, from, the formation of the canon to the early church until now, uh, is an ongoing conversation with God in the mix, but also people who are having conversations about the Bible. So I tell people, why bother reading theology? Well, a good theologian is a good reader of the Bible. So if you read a good theologian, they'll help you become a good reader of the Bible. Now, the ethics piece is saying, okay, so we spend this time reading the Bible, we spend this time doing theology. Uh, how does that actually align with what we say we believe, but also how we live? Uh, and if there's a misalignment, why is that there? And how do we realign when we say things like, oh, yeah, two greatest commandments, love God, love your neighbor, um, you know, go and do that. But if we're not doing that, then ethics is there to say, why aren't we doing that, and how can we do that more faithfully? This podcast emerged from the scholarship I do related to Jacques Ellul. He was a French sociologist and theologian. He taught at the University of Bordeaux for most of his life. He wrote a lot after the Second World War. He's most known for writing about technology. He wrote a book called The Technological Society that was pretty big. It received a an endorsement from Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World. People asked Aldous Huxley, you wrote this book. It's pretty powerful assessment of like the modern condition in technology. Are there any thinkers that have influenced your work or you would suggest? And he said, Jacques Ellul's book Technological Society did in sociological form what I was trying to do in fictional form. So that's pretty cool endorsement. But he also, so that's what he's most known for, but he also wrote sociology, like about politics, propaganda, institutions, disenfranchised youth. And he also wrote theology and ethics, and he also did biblical commentaries. So that's why I wanted to talk to you, Joel, because you've talked before about Genesis and particularly Genesis 4, Cain, the first cities, and so on. And I was like, well, funny you mentioned that because Elul did a book called The Meaning of the City. And I was like, we should talk about it. You should check out Elul's work on this. And you said, sure. So we're going to talk about that. The final thing I'll say is what is Personalist Manifestos? It is related to Elul's work. He was a part of a movement after the war in France, well, before the war and after the war in France, called personalism. You can read about that on the Substack. But basically, it was restoring the significance of the person in an age when the significance of the person had been lost. So it's not humanism. It's not sort of an abstract ideal, and it's not hyper individualist. It's just saying, what if we recenter considerations of people in anything we're talking about, whether that's politics or theology or whatever. So we have conversations about that, but we also have conversations that are adjacent to personalism in Elul's work. So what I tell people basically is this is theology talk radio. Elul was a very interdisciplinary thinker, and so am I. And so this is a space to have interdisciplinary conversations, anywhere from theology, politics, sociology, philosophy, anthropology, and biblical studies. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to get into the biblical study stuff. So why don't we do that? Do you want to set the scene for Genesis 4
Hmm.
and we'll go from there?
Yeah. Like you said, we want to talk about the city a bit and Cain. And there's some really interesting stuff going on in both of our opinions and with Elul kind of as a dialogue partner because we both kind of refreshed ourselves on Elul as we
Mhm.
were preparing this. So if anyone wants to see that, sorry, I just gotta move this thing down here. Um, anyone wants to see that, go check out that work. What's the name of
Mhm.
the book again exactly?
Meaning of the city.
Yeah, Meaning of the City.
He's also written commentary on Jonah, Book of Revelation. So the Jonah one's Judgment of Jonah. The one on Revelation is Apocalypse. So it's written on James, Genesis. So yeah, I can put those in the show notes, and maybe
Yeah,
we'll do
that'd be
some
great.
follow up episodes talking about those commentaries too. But let's
That'd be
let's
great.
do
Yeah.
uh, let's do the city in Genesis first.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. There's obviously the whole debate of what is Genesis 1 to 11 or even beyond. What is Genesis doing? And so I know immediately people were going to jump to that. Like, well, cool, what's your view of Genesis? What's your view of Genesis 1? What's your view of Genesis 1 to 3? How's that going to, like, it's such a loud space, right? Yeah, I think the way we'll approach it today and the way I approach this is that this is dealing with like the way I heard a scholar put it once this way and I really loved it. It's like taking an entire worldview and crystallizing it down into a drop and then doop, and that is worldview just the most concentrated form of worldview that you can possibly get is what we get with Genesis 1 to 11 especially. And so it's like the you ever have Crystal Light, that stuff, that juice, like
Yeah.
from yeah. Like if you know that stuff's so potent, like this in this little crystal form, it's like just if you put it in a little bit of in a bunch of water, just a little bit, just, right? It's
Yeah.
that. This is the this is the crystal light of of the Bible. It is really like everything infused in a very small amount of space. And it's trying to tell a lot in that way. And so it's going to use symbols. It's going to use iconography. It's going to use like all these different things of the ancient world, and it's going to be dialoguing with the ancient world about matters of meaning, matters of origin, matters of function around us as they're looking when this is being written. I'm not going to wade into that debate. I don't think we know exactly when this is being written, but like, what does it mean to be a human, and where did we come from, and what do we do with the things we're seeing around us, and how do we get here? What are the problems? So in that way, I'll use the term, but I don't mean it in a pejorative way, and in scholarship, it's not used in a pejorative way, like of mytho-history.
Mhm.
So myth in the sense of crystallized truth, crystallized worldview. Because when you use that term, it allows for symbolism. It allows for things to not be a video recording of history, but rather to be again, like this small, like kaleidoscopic kind of thing where you look through, and then it branches out into all of what you see in the world around you through this small amount of narrative. That's kind of how I view it. And so
Yeah.
then that's how I'm setting it up. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Alul actually talks about this in Meaning the City, and that's another area that he wrote a lot on is myth. But he wrote about it from different perspectives because he says when we're talking about myth, what are we talking about exactly? There's all types of myths. So every age, every culture, every group has myths. So, in order to understand that group, you have to not only be attentive to their myths, but be attentive to the form as well as the content. So, he said, we're talking myth, but Greeks had myths, Romans had myths, and so many other different cultures had myths. And so, we really have to ask the question like, what type of myth are we talking about? So he actually defines in Meaning of the City his understanding of biblical myth. And he says, what I see mytho-history, I like that term, as is when God's action works its way out in history. Uh, how do you describe that? So when God decides to uh, like the creators of the heaven and the earth and everything in it decides to interact with that creation, how do the creatures who are observing that directly or indirectly give an account? And this is where you get into things like poetry and symbol and metaphor, because if you just wherever you're at in terms of believing or not believing in being like God, if you grant that there, even theoretically, that there is a God that created everything, um, and then that being's probably pretty powerful. Then, when that very powerful being interacts with what that being created, it is going to be really complex and hard to document. And so, like you said, we want a film, like just give me the documentary. And that's not what they're doing. I've heard an analogy used saying, like, when it's Genesis 1 and 2, we come and say, oh, I want this document to be a blueprint. I want this to be a schematic of material origins and how everything works. And the human authors are saying, inspired by spirit. Actually, we did a painting,
Mhm.
an impressionist painting or an expressionist painting. So yeah, it's a portrayal of reality, it's a portrayal of history, but it's a particular kind of portrayal. And that we chose this way of rendering the history as compared to that way also says something on top of the content. So, the questioning that is often brought to Genesis texts, especially the early ones, is did it happen? And I say Alul's response would be as well as mine. Well, yeah, but just not in a way that's easy to categorize and pin down. So
Yeah.
that's when you get into the territory of mytho history. And to me, I'm like, that's way cooler. than
Yeah.
than just getting a blueprint and you know a documentary narrated by David Attenborough. I do like them, but
Here we have
yeah,
Adam
exactly.
and
Just
Eve.
50 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. So when we're given, a painting to gaze upon, how does that show us things over time? And we keep coming back to it, and there's always more to see and take away from it. So
Hmm.
that would be how I would wrestle with that
I mean,
question.
on top of that, you already kind of alluded to this, but that we're dealing with an ancient world where if you don't dialogue in the way in which everyone else is dialoguing, if you don't contribute to or um, battle against narratives that are going around you, you're not going to be an effective communicator.
Hmm.
And so, as much as we'd like the Bible to be a scientific treatise in our modern Enlightenment minds, it's not. It's speaking to the ancient world and the way that they're telling origins stories and the way that they're talking about who we are. And so, sorry, but it's trying to be a far more effective document than but just because you're coming at it with the wrong lens, then, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And once you understand that, and once you're actually able to compare it to other myths, right, that are surrounding Israel at the time, and you see what Israel's doing with those myths, you're like, actually, they're engaging in polemic
Oh
and
yeah,
pretty ambitious and subversive and kind of badass polemic, to be
absolutely.
honest. And so that again, you're like, there even that piece tells you a lot about who these sages are. And they're not writing these in the vacuum. They are in placed and they are surrounded by cultures that are giving different accounts of how things came to be. And they're doing some pretty interesting work in engagement with those other myths.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it'll change your view. It makes it way more enriching when you can read it that way. And hopefully we'll give some tools then, or at least some ways of reading in our discussion now
Yeah.
about on these texts that will help people kind of think about how I think these texts are conveying meaning and how you think these texts are conveying meaning. And it really opens up a new world. It becomes so exciting, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, how about you open up this world for us,
Yeah, yeah.
Joel?
Okay, well, without doing a 4 hour lecture, you get God creates stuff in the beginning. However, we want to understand that. There's some debate on Genesis 1:1 and what follows. I'm not going to get into that right now. Actually, I've got a video on the YouTube channel, so feel free to check that out.
Oh, nice.
On
Okay.
yeah, that video is correcting Cosmic Skeptic and what was the other guy's name? I can't remember right now. On Genesis 1:1 and translations thereof therein thereof. Yeah, so if you want to get that a little bit, check that out. Won't get into that right now. But so God creates stuff and puts order to the world, very much in the way that you were saying in conversation with the world around, because back then everything's kind of there's this like theomachy, the fighting of gods, and these kinds of things creating humans in other stories, but in Israel's story, as we have in the Hebrew Bible, things just get put in place by God's word, and so it's a way more peaceful thing going on, and the world is not uh, deified. The sun is not a god. The moon is not a god like it would be elsewhere, or would be representative of elsewhere. And so it's kind of this peaceful creation in that way, and then that happens in Genesis 1, skipping all of that in 7 days, and then on the eighth day, the day after God rests, you get this scene, a different scene, a different way of talking about creation at this point, and that's the scene of Eden. So God creates this land, or there's this land called Eden there, land of delight, something like that, being the name Eden, and it's set. So we're all setting up. This is all in case you're all wondering. We're setting up the Cain story right now. What's
Hmm.
going on?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Well,
We're setting up city.
because
Yeah,
you
you
can't
can't
talk
actually
about
get
the
at
Cain
this.
story without talking about what precedes it.
No, no, you can't, and you can't like the text and city as well.
Yeah.
So Eden is set up as a place. It's on a mountain as far as we can tell because there's a river going through it. Rivers go down. And Ezekiel chapter 28 mentions Eden being a mountain. So there you go. So we're on a mountain, and in the ancient world, temples were on mountains. This is what we would call cosmic mountain theology. The idea that the gods live on mountains, and Yahweh lives on a mountain in the Old Testament too. He lives in a temple on the mountain, Mount Jerusalem.
Also, great name for a psychedelic rock band.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Cosmic Mountain Theology.
yeah. Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. No, for sure. Sorry, my headphones are
Oh, darn.
annoying right now.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I
so
interrupted you with something
no, it's all good.
totally
No,
off
that
point.
that
Keep
somebody
going.
named their band that and tell us.
Yes,
Yeah, and
or
so
we
we've
should.
got this thing going on in this mountain in Eden. Just getting my headphones set up here. And then uh God is on this mountain, and it sets it like there's a temporal reference here, which is actually quite important. It says that this happens before Yahweh caused rain, and before there was a man tilling the ground. And people often skip over that, or they go, "Hey, isn't that contradictory to Genesis 1?" To which I say, "No, not at all. It's not saying the same thing as Genesis 1. Genesis 1, God creates this orderly world and whatnot. Here it says specifically God, before Yahweh caused to rain. And if you look at the Hebrew there, it's the same term and conjugation as when God causes the flood. So before God flooded the world, that's what I think it's saying. So before the flood, this is antediluvian, way back when, way back, and before there was a man tilling the ground. Oh, does that mean that there's no humans existing? No, it says before a man was tilling the ground. That is before agriculture, before people were making fields, doing that thing, like this whole idea of formalized agriculture. So before the flood, before formalized agriculture, and that's our cue for city, right? Because that's what's going to happen with cities is there's going to be formalized agriculture. Um, and so it's saying in the pre-flood world, before we had these cities, this is the setting for the Adam and Eve story on this eighth day, and you get Eden then portrayed, and I'm not going to go into great detail here, but as a temple, like I said, you're going to have Adam and Eve being portrayed as priests, and we'll talk about this a bit more later, I think, and they're going to be in kind of this space, what I would call sacred space, what we would call sacred space with Yahweh, this place of meeting with Yahweh. And so it's not this kind of distant view of God. God was creating everything in Genesis 1. Genesis 1 notoriously or famously only uses Elohim, this generic term for God. And then Yahweh, this personal name for God, appears in Genesis 2. Often that is source critically claimed to be a reason for the differences. I don't actually think that holds up. I think instead we're talking about different conceptions. And now we're dealing with sacred space, the personified God, and in relationship with humans, which is why Yahweh is used in chapter 2. Um, that's a whole other thing. But it's a different literary purpose here. And so they are in this space with God, and it's before agriculture. This garden seems to be like an easy place, promise ease. It's only outside of the land of Eden that the ground appears to not make it not easy. So like animals aren't being chauffeured to people out there, but in here where Adam is put, so Adam is taken. It says he's taken and put in the garden. So it's interesting. He's not actually starting in the garden. He's starting out there and then put in there to this garden place. And by the way, I'd say Eden is not the Garden of Eden. Eden is a place, and the garden is in Eden, in the east of Eden. So think about Eden as a whole geography, and then one subsection that's in the eastern part of it is the garden. So further west, you could go further west, and that would be further up the mountain. And so it's this whole geography going on in sacred space as well, where the garden is a little bit east from further up, which would be closer towards God, going up the mountain, so to speak. That's actually kind of important because I think the tabernacle and the temple is going to mimic Eden, in that Adam and Eve are in the garden, which is in if you know the temple structure, you've got the Holy of Holies, and then you've got the antechamber, and then you've got the courtyard, and then you've got outside of that. They're in the antechamber. They're in this meeting place between the Holy of Holies, where no one can go, like God's full presence, and between the courtyard where the people are, and it's like this intermediate space, this mediation space is where Adam and Eve are presented as in the garden narrative. And so they're getting animals chauffeured to them, plants are growing, Yahweh's just kind of taking care of them in this spot. Whereas the real world out there is where there's some issues. If they were outside of this garden where Yahweh is, uh, that's where you might get a temptation to make something like the city, where it's like we're not being provided for. Things are not being just kind of chauffeured to us. So then what do we do? And how do we structure ourselves? And so the text is really asking, it begins with that kind of question because there's no agriculture, there's no city yet, but they're being provided for. But what if they weren't? What if they were outside of that? And I think that's the setting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really helpful and so interesting. Bible's so cool, man. Bible's so cool.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
One of the things I think about as you're talking about this spatiality and like different layers, and the further down and out you get, the more wilderness-esque it gets. And this, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is a rendering of paradise in a sort of desert world, right? So the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are an example, right? Like it's common to build a structure that is overrun with lush greenery and streams and animals and such, because it's an indication of something sacred and um paradisical, if that's a word, uh
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the midst
yeah.
of a climate where that is very, very uncommon, right? And so these renderings in Genesis are engaging that image or that way of doing things in civilization, but they're doing it in a different way. Am I on point there?
Um, with with a parallel to the Babylonian idea of temple in the midst of
Yeah,
uh
well, just I mean, because this like jumping all the way to the Book of Revelation, right? You get a garden city.
hmm hmm
Um, so it's all the way from Genesis to Revelation. It's like everybody's trying different ways of creating paradise, and some of those are better and some of those are worse. And what we're getting from the Hebrew Bible and then the New Testament is this is God's version, and here's how
yeah.
this is how we continually get in the way of the paradise that God is trying to give us. And God in his patience, like, is willing to work with us who continually get in the way and adopt some of the things that we're bringing. But it's 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 both engaged but aloof from other attempts at paradise, from other civilizations, some of whom would consider themselves greater and better.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, even the fact that it's a garden is
Yeah,
opening the question of is having it in a city, is having it in this in these formalized structures and big societies, is that a problem? Because the paradise that God portrays at first is one without the city. And so that's also asking the question because he could have depicted it differently, right? It could
yeah,
be yeah, like with lots of people and with shops and with formal agriculture and all that, but it doesn't. It
yeah.
says it's really almost um, like wilderness based or what's the term I'm looking for? Like a wild man kind of view, like an what's
Hmm.
what? Yeah, I'm trying to think of the word, but it's not coming to me. Yeah, and so it's really like bringing up this idea of almost prehistoric humans, like the humans before we know now,
Yeah,
and this time before time, so to speak,
yeah,
is and the value of that even like what
yeah.
does it mean to have been now be something other than that? We see similar things in like the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Enkidu, like this Adam type figure, kind of like figure, is like a wild man who gets civilized, and there's benefits. How he gets civilized is very different. He sleeps with a prostitute, uh, Shamhat, but yeah, the fact that he goes from the state of wild to civilized and to become like God. Actually, it says he becomes like the gods in this civilizing of himself. But uh, that story, as well as asking questions about what have we gained and lost
Yeah.
from this,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah. Well, makes me think of Jeremiah, right? Because they're in exile in Babylon and they're told to what? Try and escape as soon as you can. No, they're told actually to settle down plant gardens, and tend to the welfare of the city. And in tending to the welfare of the city, you will do well as well, right? So, but Israel never leaves behind gardening. It just is gardening that takes place in different places. Some better circumstances, some worse. But yeah, it's this thread. I was going to say golden thread, but it's a green thread that continues all the way through. So Elul stresses what you're stressing here in terms of like pre-civilization, pre-technology, all these things as we tend to think about civilization and technology because the two are often paired. You don't get civilization without technology, but you don't get technology without civilization. And I would stress this too, that there's actually nothing in Genesis 1 and 2 that suggests that there is technology in the pre-fall creation because yes, Adam and Eve are told to till and keep in the garden and to be fruitful and multiply, but it also says all the trees freely yield what you need in terms of eating and all the water's there for you to drink.
And they
So
look
there's
good too. You don't even have to prune them.
yeah, you don't even need to prune them. But sometimes people will read the tilling and keeping and say, well, if God's telling them to do that, plus be fruitful and multiply, well, surely they had, a need for technology. But then there's this element of saying, well, everything is actually hospitable to you. You don't need to actually grow food. You don't even need to prune the trees. So there's a certain like vision of expansion, but how does that expansion actually take place? How does that cultivation take place? I think that we get an indication of it through the first thing that God asks Adam to do, which is name the animals. So he's so God creates the animals and says to Adam, "Hey, I'm going to bring these animals in front of you, and I want to see what you're going to name them." So Adam names them, and also, in those texts, God says, you can eat from any tree; they yield up except for this one. So putting all those pieces together, my reading is that Adam and Eve were meant to till, keep, and cultivate with the word. And there was a responsiveness to creation pre-fall that maybe all that was needed to get the plants to grow and you know the the garden to expand was just talking and just
Mhm.
right. And there's all sorts of research. I don't know if it's credible, but that if you talk to your plants or sing to your plants or you say mean words to a plant or nice ones, like that'll affect its growth. I want it to be true. I really do. But we're post fall now, so it's not in the way that it was before. But
That's
this
interesting though,
squares,
because that would
yeah,
connect to God, to being in the image of God as speaking creation
yeah,
into being.
totally.
Like
Yeah,
the Adam and Eve with their own words
yeah,
are being mediators of God's presence
yeah,
as that's what I think the image is. Like the image is you are the tangible presence of God on the earth.
yeah,
You are the breath of God, the idol, the image in which God's breath is breathed into, and then the presence is manifested in the world. That
yeah,
is what an idol was. But however, Yahweh doesn't have idols in that way that are in his temple, in the Holy of Holies. Rather, he has humans as the image, as the
yeah,
idol that the breath of God is breathed into, and which then represent the world. So in that role, then they are breathing out and speaking the word of God, like chapter one.
yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. And just to support you with some biblical studies, is that the only place where to till and to serve, to work and to serve, is used elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, as far as I'm aware and remember, is in Numbers, and it refers to priestly work. So many people have made that connection where Adam and Eve are being depicted as priests here with working and serving, and I agree with that. I think they're absolutely being portrayed as working and serving
yeah,
in a temple, and so this is that kind of priestly word oriented
yeah,
work. Not to mention ritual, but
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. Well, the other piece too that they inherit from God is God sees creation and says it's very good, and this squares with the naming as well. It's not just giving the animal a name in terms of setting up a scientific taxonomy. The Hebrew approach to naming is it's a reflection of your recognition of its being. And
Mhm.
it's not only an acknowledgement of that being, but it's also an anointing or a bringing forth of that in a way, right? And
Yeah.
so again, there's this inheritance from God in terms of like the word, but also this recognition and declaring something good.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And like it's
yeah,
not, yeah, again, not just taxonomy. It's involving them in the act of being the image, the
yeah,
representative of God, because you are now doing what God did in chapter one by naming, by saying out loud, this is that. Let this be this, let this be that, let this be that. They are co-regents in that way. They are participating with God in the formation and care and characterization of the world around them, which I think is again all priestly, again all related like to what you're just saying. It's a priestly ministry that they're being
yeah,
depicted in, regal as well.
yeah, yeah. Um, that's super, super intriguing. And I've written a piece on theology of naming engagement and flow. If people want to check it out, I'll put in the show notes. But moving to the Genesis 3, where there's the fall, I think everything we're saying here applies to the conversation that they have with the serpent. So this is where the guarding the garden comes into play, where they were told to till and keep and guard, and if it's according to the word, well, what is it that causes the fall? It's a conversation with the serpent and the silence of one of the people in that conversation while it's happening. That leads to the fall, right? So the serpent says, did God really say that? And even if he did, um, you're not going to die. God just doesn't want you to be like God. So that's why he's telling you not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And Eve says, we're not supposed to eat from it, but we're not even supposed to look at it or touch it. And that she gets into a procedural kind of debate, a legalistic debate, as you were. And Adam, we find out, is quiet the whole time. And so they're both implicated in this sort of failure to guard the word, but in different ways. Whereas Eve is adding too much on, Adam's not saying anything at all, and so then they eat the fruit, and the rest is tragic, fallen history, as they say. But what do you make of that?
Well, yeah, no, for sure. This is the origin of halakha, which is the this Jewish idea of like legal debate, how to properly interpret God's word and walking in His law, which you have famously. I mean, it's in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament, it's in rabbinic post-biblical literature, intertestamental literature for that matter. But yeah, it's like, how do you do this? To what degree? And Eve is trying for one halakhic response, which is like, hey, let's be a little bit more tight here on this. Adam is going for the absolute opposite, and the snake is also going for their own. So it's like it's the original Bible study.
Yeah, yeah,
What do
yeah,
we do? This is what he said. What does it mean?
yeah. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And for those listening or not listening who just want to blame it all on Eve, the text won't let you do that.
Oh no, not at all. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul riffs on this in pastoral epistles, First Timothy 2, when he says that like that Adam was formed first, not Eve, and I think he's ruminating on how like, hey, Adam was had a longer time there to think about this, yet still failed. Adam had a greater responsibility with more time with the word, yet failed.
Yeah.
So I think that's even inherent, perhaps, in the subtext of what's going on here. Yeah.
Wait, 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 wait. So you're saying Paul is not a patriarchal misogynist, Joel?
Oh no, 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 he definitely is. No.
Oh, okay. Whew. I was scared
Yeah.
for a second there because I thought I was going to lose all my proof text
Oh yeah.
for being
No, no,
a
yeah, no, no, I
a
actually like
raging
Paul.
patriarchal
Yeah.
misogynist myself. By the way, for those who can't tell, we are being sarcastic here. Joel and I like to be sarcastic,
Yes, we
just
do.
a little Bible humor, but also we also want people to, like a lot of biblical scholars, know the real Paul.
Yeah,
Um,
I really like Paul, by the way.
yeah,
I know a lot of
he's a
people
cool
don't.
guy.
Yeah, I like Paul. I feel like we would vibe if we were hanging out.
Well, yeah,
I mean, he's probably even more like mystic than I am, and I'm already pretty mystic. So,
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just this is kind of hermeneutics 101, but it's like just we always have to watch what we're bringing to the text. Like if
Oh
we
yeah.
assume certain things about somebody like Paul, or we assume certain things about Genesis, then we're gonna have that bias confirmed. But if we are open to being surprised that maybe there's more there than we previously thought, uh, that often happens. There's more than we actually think. Um,
Yeah.
okay,
Just
so
by the way, if anybody's
yeah.
hearing some background noise, I don't know if it'll come through on audio through my mic. I got a good mic, but I hope it's not picking up. There is some noise behind me. So sorry if that is coming through on anyone who's listening to this later on. Hopefully it'll stop pretty quick. I can't control it at the moment.
I
So
don't
yeah.
hear it. This is all
Okay,
right.
good.
Is it your, what is it?
It's a
What's
laundry
the,
machine.
look,
Yeah.
see, look at you go, right? Just getting the
Yeah.
chores done and talking Bible.
Absolutely. That's basically my life.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a good
Let's
life.
move.
It's
Yeah.
a good life. I am not complaining.
Yes. Okay. Well, tell us. Yeah, it is. It is good life here. Okay. So the
So should we get a
garden.
bit more into some city
Yeah.
here?
Yeah. Tell me about the garden. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
let's get into we've really sort of done the groundwork of setting the scene. So now let's get to Cain. What happens
Yeah, yeah.
after the fall and
Yeah, well, I
Adam and
mean,
Eve and Cain?
there's a bit more I think we can do here because in the garden we're gonna get like a motif going on and
Yeah.
some wordplay.
Yeah.
So for all y'all out there who are like, how does Joel think about the Hebrew Bible? You're about to see this is how I think about the Hebrew Bible. Is this how everybody thinks about the Hebrew Bible? No. However, this is a strand of scholarship. I would direct you to people like David Andrew Teeter, um, William Tooman, on like how these narratives are telling stories and it is very much based in literary design, in wordplay, in symmetry, in repetition on a theme, but then breaking from the theme, like all this. One of those things is wordplay. I think wordplay is going on here. So in the garden, you have God makes what's often translated a helper. I like the idea of more like a strong ally. I think that works better. An azer. He makes Eve as an azer for Adam. Okay, when you read this word in Hebrew, it just I'm not going to get into any of the logistics. It just looks a certain way. It's three letters that look a certain way. So then there are people who argue that there's a wordplay that's going to start going forward from here. So he makes an azer, a helper, and then we're going to see that uh, Cain is going to get a sign put on him, an oat. And the azer and oat actually look relatively similar in Hebrew. And then also Cain is going to build an ear. And ear and azer also look very similar. And so there's going to be this play on what God builds for humans and what Cain is going to build for himself. So God is going to build, the word is build, bana in Hebrew. He's going to build the Azer. And that's actually weird terminology to use to build an Azer, but it's because it's riffing on what Cain is going to build. And Cain is going to build an ear, and they look very similar, almost the same. And so the text is going to be kind of giving a picture um, that God is giving this help and a sign to protect, but Cain ignores those and he builds instead a city for himself. And Cain doesn't even acknowledge that God gives him the sign in the story. He doesn't acknowledge, like you said, his wife in the story. It's like the narrator is going to press us to see him as disregarding the importance of these things in order to build something for himself, which is going to be the city. So you got a
Yeah.
tale of two buildings: the building of a person, an Azer, for humans, for the man, and then the building of a city, an ear, for Cain. And so
Yeah.
there's like this wordplay that starts to go on in the Hebrew text here as well. Hey, yeah, everybody, you have just been paused. We just paused this on you because if you would like to see the rest of this, please head on over to Michael's channel where you can see the rest of the video. That's Michael. I hope you've recognized that by now. That's Michael. And so head over there
I'm Michael.
and check. That's Michael. Michael Morelli. Dr. Michael Morelli. Just so go over there. Okay, it's there. Okay, bye.